My work has been used unsighted, and that's problematic for many reasons. But when it comes to what happened with RFK and MedMaps, that's influencing discussion on how to best uncover the pathology of autism. Because I synthesize autism biomarkers to figure out the pathology of autism. I call my DC rep. 6 days later, RFK's on the news saying he is going to synthesize autism biomarkers to figure out the pathology of autism. Can he explain how he's going to do that? Absolutely not. Because I created a biochemical network of gene-coded proteins and compared autism biomarkers to that network to figure out the points of dysregulation, and that is how I synthesized the data. By comparing it to a human blueprint that I hand-constructed. I tried to collaborate. I physically walked into the Autism Research Center in Madison, Wisconsin. 3 times now begging for help. I crowdfunded to go back to school for bioinformatics to ask for help and was told no because I didn't have the credentials they wanted me to have. And no matter how many credentials I tack on after the fact, it will never change the fact that the moment in time that I did this, I was just a mom and a teacher. This is the biochemical cascade that was uncovered through comparing autism biomarkers to the human blueprint of gene-coded proteins. It was data versus data. It was these neurotransmitters are dysregulated in this specific way. The endocannabinoid system and lipid profiles are dysregulated in this specific way. Epigenetic redox-sensitive protein shunts are present from chronic ROS, from NOS uncoupling. The only plausible explanation is a BH4 shunt that is activated over a lifetime. And how does that happen? The gene mutation has to be causing the stress response that leaves it chronically stuck. Or there's a situational trigger that doesn't resolve. My credentials have nothing to do with that data. Stanford didn't come up with their own experiment to uncover this same BH4 shunt. No, they went straight for that neurotransmitter imbalance in the brain circuitry that I said led to the autism traits, and it worked. Their neurodiversity project had been talking about me for years. They target my downstream mechanism. It worked, and they claimed credit. Brazilian researchers used my hypothesis in their introduction as prior literature. When I told the journal and they were asked why they did this, they said they discovered it as part of their study. How is it in the intro and the conclusion? Dr. Naveau from UCSD published my entire biochemical cascade of autism and the comorbidities. When I confronted their research integrity department, they said not enough plagiarism occurred. As a teacher, any level should suffice. How long have you been on here hearing me shout that autism and the comorbidities are biochemically linked and they can't happen at the same time without a joint root cause, and gene mutations impact biochemical pathways differently, leading to each one of the traits? Guess what Princeton published? They admit to testing the same hypothesis in their preprint and scrub it from the Nature published version. When confronted, they have a months-long investigation and then send me a letter the day after Christmas stating that they did nothing wrong. This letter expired in 7 days whether I opened it or not. Who okayed that over Christmas break? Yale's new study has my autism trait section of my theory right in their summary. This difference in glutamate receptor availability supports the theory that an imbalance between excitatory and inhibitory signaling may contribute to autism-related traits. The thing is, that's been discussed for a while. I just put everything in its place. Because there's lots of different theories about autism traits and what causes them, and comorbid traits and what causes them. I said, nope, this mechanism goes here, that goes there, that goes there. So the EI imbalance in the corticostriatothalamic loop is what leads to autism traits. Comorbidities are caused by epigenetic redox-sensitive protein shunts that alter typical development and typical function. Which cluster you get depends on which stress response system, regulatory system, is left chronically activated. Because that changes specific biochemical pathway activity changes, but they all lead to the BH4 shunt because that is the core of our stress response system. For better or worse, that's my model. Different aspects have been talked about in literature and across literature, but I created this specific biochemical cascade by comparing autism biomarkers to a biochemical network. I didn't piecemeal different studies. I looked at the data and found out where the points of dysregulation were, and then that biochemical cascade is what it is. Everything is delineated, everything has its place. It was like figuring out a jigsaw puzzle. I took my nonverbal autistic daughter from silence to speech, and that's what sparked all of this. And I did use neuroplasticity-based instruction strategies to do this. I specifically targeted motor neurons and the language circuits using well-established teaching pedagogy. Teaching pedagogy is the science of how to teach, not what you're teaching, but how you're teaching it. And pedagogy exists in teaching because you teach children all kinds of skills throughout the years. So having a core basis of how you're going to teach those things is really important because it optimizes the outcome. And that's what I did for my daughter, is I optimized the outcome of each activity I was doing with her, because that circuitry is built over experience, the language circuitry. And that is a time-regulated process. This image right here is from a Harvard study. Those don't open back up. They're called critical time periods. I don't have a specific protocol that I sell on what I did specifically to help my nonverbal autistic daughter speak, because that would be a therapeutic protocol, and I don't have a license for that. What I can do is share the neuroplasticity-based instructional framework that I used, and that is what I share. Even my story with my daughter is anecdotal. I've had many other parents say that it's helped. I've had many parents say that it hasn't. The thing is, they've never tested the physical mechanisms that produce speech sounds for function in someone who can't speak. They look at these parts on the outside for function, but they don't physically scan the insides to see what they look like and if they're broken or anything. And until they do that and they set a protocol for testing what's not working and diagnosing and giving a prognosis on whether or not you can treat it or whether you need to accommodate throughout the lifespan, we are just going to be throwing everything but the kitchen sink at it and seeing what sticks. And I don't like that. I didn't like that for my daughter. I don't want that for anyone else's child. I do think that we need to focus on this protocol. So much has happened, I don't even know where to start. My goal in all of this has been to figure out whether or not my theoretical framework on the pathology of autism has merit and to protect the integrity of it as people start to dig in. The thing about advocacy is the goal is to influence the field.